Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shvius, Perek Yud, Halacha Beis, and Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Pei Dalid. We are mamish heading towards the end of the Masechta. We just learned about a prusbel, and as the Gemara explained on Daf Pei Gimel Amid Beis, that biblically there is a way of seeing to it that the Shvi'is does not cancel the loans, and that is, if you physically transfer the documents, you hand over the physical documents to Beis Din. What Hillel accomplished with the enactment of Prusbel is that when a person only declares that they're transferring their debts, that declaration could be recorded. But you don't have to physically give over the documents themselves. The mere declaration itself is effective in making sure and seeing to it that the Shvi'is here does not cancel the debts, and that's a big accomplishment. And as we'll see in a moment, that the power of Shvi'is to cancel the loans, l'chu'ura, is not related to the land itself. It's not like the dinim of Trumos or Maisres, and therefore it should be independent of whether we are living in the land of Israel, whether we're not living in the land of Israel. Nevertheless, we'll see from a limud that the Torah makes a hekesh between Shemitah and Yovel. And as we'll see in today's sugya, that from a certain point onwards, Yovel was no longer in effect. And it's only going to come back into effect, as we'll see, according to the Yerushalmi, not only when the Kol Yoshveh Aleha, literally meaning when all of the Yidden resettle in Israel, all meaning the majority, but as well as that every tribe has to live in their ancestral part of the land of Israel. And that is something that's currently not happening, even if we are living at the period where the majority of Jews live in Israel. We don't have the majority of Shvatim necessarily. L'chura, we don't. And most importantly, again, according to the Yerushalmi, we need to live each shevet in the part that was given to that specific shevet, and only then will Yovel return. Only when Yovel is in effect is the biblical power of the Shvi'is here, that it cancels the loans, is that in effect? The fact that even nowadays, Shvi'is is mishamet, it demands for us to relinquish the debts. That's a rabbinic halacha, and all of that is to explain why Hillel has the power, since the whole din is midrabanan, to enact the prusbel. We're going to learn today about She'ibuda de Rab Nosson. She'ibuda de Rab Nosson means a very simple concept. Rab Nosson was an Amoira, and the Shibud means the lien of Rab Nosson. If A lends money to B, and B lends money to C, Rab Nosson says that we could view A as the creditor to C. If A wants, A can demand payment directly from C. Now, that's very important concerning the dinim that we are learning, and welcome to the newcomers, and that is that, as we'll see later, as we'll see, God willing, tomorrow, that a prusbel can only be made if the borrower owns land. And we're going to see how we will use Shibuda de Rab Nosson to allow a prusbel even where the actual borrower himself doesn't own land, but the person to this borrower loaned money. If that person owns land, it's considered as if he owns land for a prusbel to be allowed to be written, as we'll see inside. And finally, we're going to learn today about a phenomenon which is fascinating. There is a lot about predated and post-dated documents. Not so simple. I know that we don't hesitate. We write checks, we write a post-date, we write a predate. Halachically, it's problematic. We'll see to what degree. What we'll see today is that the rules of predated versus post-dated, how they apply to all documents, are the opposite of how they apply in a prusbel, and we'll see exactly how that plays out, God willing, when we will learn inside. So we are on Daf Pei Dalid Amid Aleph. We are all the way on top of the Amid. And Amar Rabbi Chuna, right, we're learning over here, Talmud Yerushalmi, so we have new names. So Amar Rabbi Chuna told all of us that Kashiyasi Kumei Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, that I asked the following question in front of Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha. Keman the Amar Maestros midvar Torah, the Hillel Maskin al dvar Torah. Really, we had in the beginning of the 6th chapter, in the pagination that we are learning, Daf Mem Beis, Daf Mem Gimel, we had a machlokes whether Maestros are in effect even during the Second Temple era. We had there a debate, and the Gemara is asking, according to the opinion that holds that the obligation to tithe is biblical even during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, and the Gemara, based on that, is making a link. If that's the case, so then the 7th year the power to relinquish loans, that's called Shemitah, should also be in effect on the 7th year. Biblically, based on that premise, how can Hillel circumvent a din Torah? The Hillel maskin al devar Torah. Look inside the top Marafulda. Leman the Amar Maestros b'zman hazeh min Torah. So it says the Marafulda that we learned in the chapter of the 3 Arotzos. Perik Vav Halacha Aleph. Again, this is Daf Mem Beis, Daf Mem Gimel. That it Masham Plukta Bozem. We have indeed such an argument, and V'kasha the Gemara is asking. Leman the Amar, according to the opinion that Maestros b'bayisheni is devar Torah. L'choura, therefore, imkein afa shmita dvar Torah. So v'heich ba Hillel v'hiskin pruzbol la'akar shmita shi dvar Torah. How can you do that? How can you circumvent a biblical? God says when the 7th year comes, all of the loans becomes canceled. And how can Hillel enact anything that will give us a way out? So it says the Gemara, hold on. Omar Rabbi Yosi asks Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Chuna, why are you asking this question only according to the opinion that holds that the obligation of giving Trumas Maestros, even Bisman Bayesheni, is Dvar Torah, which implies that you agree that if Maestros during the Second Temple era was only rabbinic, then it doesn't bother you that Hillel made a takana. Why? Why? Even according to that Nanda Amar, I also have a kasha. Is it from when the Yidden went into Golos and Bayis Rishon? All that we were exempted from were from obligations that are connected to the land. Since, as we learned before, the Kedusha that was imbued in the land came through the conquest of Yehoshua. So when Bavel conquered the land away from the Jews, their conquest, so to say, canceled our conquest, and therefore a certain level of holiness in the land was taken away. And therefore there are those who hold that never returned yet, it's only going to come back with Mashiach, and therefore the obligation to tithe is only rabbinic. Okay, but that works because many mitzvahs in the Torah are connected to the land. So therefore, there are those who hold that there is no more Kedusha on the level that you should be biblically obligated. Problem is, the Hashmeit Ksafim, the rule that all debts are canceled when the 7th year goes. That is not connected to the land. It's not a mitzvah connected to the land. You understand? Tithing means when something grows, you have to give from product, you have to give a certain amount to the Kohen and to the Levi. Canceling loans have nothing to do with the land. And therefore, indeed, Noyeg, indeed, here we live in LA. In LA, you don't have to give Trumas Umaisras. Here in LA, the din that Shemitah cancels the loan stands. It's not a land-bound mitzvah. So basically, Rabbi Yosef is asking Rabbi Chuna, why are you asking a kasha on Hillel? Only according to the opinion that holds that Maestros, even during the Second Temple era and onwards, is midvar Torah, even according to the opinion that we learned above on Daf Mem Gimel, that Maestros never came back as a biblical obligation as of yet. So what? I would argue that the din of Shemitah is biblical. So Rabbi Yosi himself answered this question. Rabbi Yosi v'Amar. No. Rabbi Chuna was right to make that link. And the reason for that is because we have, as you can read the entire pasuk in the Torah Oir HaShalom, and I'm quoting the verse, it says, V'zed dvar hashmita, which means this is the matter of relinquishment. You know what relinquishment means? To let go of. It means if you owe me money, I want to collect. I have to let go of that collection. And the Torah says that Shomait called Baal Mashe Yodai, I'm reading the entire pasuk, relinquish. Every creditor shall relinquish Asher Yasher B'Re'eyu, that which he has a claim over his fellow. I have a claim over you. God says relinquish. Lo Yigois Esreyeyu, do not approach, do not ask for, do not demand for payment. Not from your friend, not from your brother. Why? Because Kikara Shemitah Lashem. Because the seventh year has in it this power of Shemitah. Many people call the seventh year Shemitah, the year of relinquishment. Now the Torah mentions twice the word Shamoit. V'zed dvar hashmita Shamoit. It's double. So from the double expression, we make a hekesh, which is, says Rabbi Yossi, only when the prohibition of working the land. So you have to relinquish your rights on the land because you can't work it. Only when that is in effect. Then the other din of Shemitah, which is to relinquish debts, hashmeit ksafim is noyeg. And indeed, the laws of not working the land is only connected to Israel. We are allowed to work the land as usual out of Israel. The din that you have to relinquish the debts on the seventh year, that's independent of Israel. And the Chanami, because it's not a mitzvah hatuluya ba'aretz. But the fact that the Torah writes the double expression, Shamait, Shamait, we make the hekesh, to tell you only when one Shemitah is noyeg, is the other Shemitah noyeg, bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz la'aretz. But whenever Shemitah is only in effect rabbinically, and so are some who hold that the moment Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel conquered the land away from us, the Kedusha left, even though we resettled it under the leadership of Ezra, the level of Kedusha did not return enough for us to be obligated biblically to tithe. Now, rabbinically, we have to. Fine. So we have to relinquish debts rabbinically. Hashmit ksafim noyeg bein ba'aretz bein b'chutz la'aretz midivreim. So Bekitzer, Rabbi Yossi justified the way Rab Chuna formulated the question, but Rab Chuna's question stands. And his question is that there are many opinions, and so paskins the Rambam, that when we resettled the land under Ezra, that was not, the Kedusha did not enter the land because of conquest, because we didn't reconquer the land. We were given permission by the Persians to settle the land. That's called a kinyan of Chazaka. That kinyan of Chazaka never was removed, even though the Romans conquered Israel, but they never removed the Kedusha that was invested through Chazaka, and therefore we are obligated, if the majority of the Jews live in Israel, as it was during the Second Temple era, as it was during the times of Hillel, we were obligated biblically to give Trumas u'Maisros. And now we have this Hekesh. So if we were obligated biblically to give Trumas u'Maisros, like that man the Amr, then the obligation to relinquish debts is a biblical obligation. So how can the rabbinate circumvent the biblical obligation? And you're right. HaMoiser shtoirosav lebeisdin is takamina Torah effective. But that's not what pruzbul is. Pruzbul is that you don't have to give over a document to the beisdin. You make a declaration. At most, you record the declaration. You record it. But it's about the declaration that is made in front of a beisdin. How can you do that? So Tamon Amrin, Mar answers that the answer that we have in Babel is afilu command the Amr Meisters Dvar Torah, even according to those who hold that, that during the Second Temple era, giving Meisters is a biblical obligation. Moida, they also will agree that the Shemitah, that the din of relinquishing debts is only midivreim, only rabbinic. And it's amazing how we're going to quote another Braisa that's going to quote the same pasuk in the A. That's going to focus on the fact that the Torah uses the word Shemitah twice, v'zed dvar hashmita shamoit, and therefore we make a hekesh between one Shemitah and the other. But this Braisa is not making a hekesh between Shemitah of resting the land on the Shemitah and the din of relinquishing loans, but we're going to see we make a connection between Yovel and relinquishing loans. The Tani, as we learned in the Braisa, v'zed dvar hashmita shamoit. Again, you have this double expression. So Rabbi says, there's a hekesh. But you're making a hekesh between the wrong things. The hekesh is not between the obligation of resting the land on Shemitah. No, that he says, Shnei Shemitah Malalu is Shemitah v'yovel. The Torah is juxtaposing the obligation of relinquishing loans, not collecting debts, and the obligation to practice the din of yovel. Now, yovel is actually relinquishment of land, because Shemitah on every 7th year, what exactly are you relinquishing? You have to give up your right of planting. Okay, but you keep your land. What yovel does is that lands that are not from your ancestral inheritance, if it's something that you purchased, you actually have to relinquish the land. You have to forego it completely. And that's the Shemitah. That b'shosh ha-yovel noyig, only when yovel is in effect, then do we say biblically, is there an obligation to relinquish debts? Again, the relinquishment of debts is whether you live in Israel, whether you live out of Israel. But the din of Shmitas Ksafim is connected to Shmitas Karka by Yovel. But Pasku HaYovelos, when Yovel was no longer in effect, it's suspended, then Shemitah Neheges only midevreim, even according to the opinion that holds that Trumas Umaislis during the times of the Second Temple was a biblical obligation. And this answers the question, basically, because what we're saying is that since the obligation of not collecting debts is only rabbinic, so Heim Amru veHeim Amru, the Chachamim have the right, Pruz, Bule, Bute, for the wealthy not to violate, not lending, for the poor people, obviously, to get a loan if they need a loan, and people would hesitate to lend because it's at the end of the 7th year, as we learned. So that is a great enactment, which the Chachamim have the right, again, because the whole thing is only rabbinic. And now the question is, from when did we suspend the din of Yovel? When did that happen? And why did that happen? So quickly, when we began this Masechta, we read the Rambam inside. Just to quickly recap, good to Chazer. There's a machlokes whether Kedusha Rishoina Kitchel Shaita Kitchel Asad Lavei or Kedusha Rishoina Kitchel Shaita V'lo Kitchel Asad Lavei. That's step number one. Now, as we mentioned from the Rambam, we separate Yerushalmi and HaKodesh from the rest of the Holy Land. According to all opinions, from when David HaMelech conquered Yerushalmi and established the Harabayis as the place of the Beis HaMikdash, that Kedusha Lo'olam Lo'izazim Imekayma. According to all opinions, even when the first temple was destroyed, the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash never left. And subsequently, Yerushalayim gets its holiness from the place of the temple. Really, Yerushalayim refers to the place of the temple. When we are davening right now, Uvinei Yerushalayim et HaKodesh, people ask a question, Uvinei Yerushalayim, we're davening for that? Yerushalayim was never as built as it is today, true, but not the Beis HaMikdash. Yerushalayim begins with the Holy Temple. So that's number one. That never left. Now, when it comes to the remaining parts of the Holy Land, the Rambam paskins that Kedusha Rishoina, Kitchel Shaita, V'loi Kitchel Asad Lavei. As we explained, and the Rambam says why. Because the Kedusha wasn't viewed in the land because we conquered it. So when the Babylonians conquered it away from us, which is what happened, you get it? So the same way we got it, the same way we lost it. If conquest gives Kedusha, conquest by the Jews, so then the conquest of the Goyim removed the Kedusha. In other words, when was the obligation of Trumas Umaisris stopped? When Bavel conquered Israel. That's now. Did it come back? So we paskin that yes, it comes back. That when we resettled Israel, only in the lands that we resettled, while we were there, was it re-imbued with Kedusha. That second Kedusha never left, even though the Romans conquered us. But the moment you don't have the majority of the Jews living in Israel, so says the Rambam, the obligation of tithing is only rabbinic. When the majority of the Jews live in Israel, then the tithing goes back to being biblical. All of that is Trumas Umaisris. Yovel is something else altogether. And let's read it inside. Yovel has to do with Yavlad.
Quick question. Why did the Kedusha not leave the second time? Why did it leave
because the Romans conquered Israel.
Well, did the Babylonians conquer it also?
Yes, but the Babylonians conquered, and their conquest nullified our conquest under Yehoshua.
Oh, so we didn't conquer the second time? Is that the chab?
The chap is that the way in has to be the way out. The way out has to be commensurate to the way in. So conquest can nullify conquest. When we settled the second time, we didn't conquer the land. We were given permission. We were given permission. We never gave permission for the Romans to take us out. So what they did wasn't equal to what we did. It was different. So the conquest could not take away our chazaka. Now, Yovel has a whole different thing. And actually, during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash already, there was a chunk of time where Yovel was not noyeg. When did Yovel become suspended? So here we are quoting a pasuk that we have in Bahar, and again, you can read the entire pasuk in the Torah Oir HaSholem, and it says, "V'kidashtem shnas hachamishim shanam." That's where the Torah introduces the din of Yovel, that we have to sanctify the 50th year, ukarasem deroir ba'aretz, and proclaim freedom throughout the land. And then the Torah says, "L'chol yoshveh," to all that inhabit the land. L'chol yoshveh, the Gemara in Yerushalmi has two limudim from L'chol yoshveh, two limudim. Let's read it inside. So first of all, there's the yoshveh, and then there is the L'chol yoshveh. So says the Braisa, yoshveh, when the Torah says that the proclamation of freedom are for its inhabitants, bisman sheyoshveh aleh, it means when the inhabitants are on the land. V'loy bisman shegolim etoichem, and not from we were exiled from the land. Who exiled us from the land? Who exiled us from the land during the times of the first temple? Sancheriv. Sancheriv went. He began by exiling the 2.5 tribes that lived me'ever layarden, Gad, Reuven, and Gad and Chatzi Shevet Menashe. That's how they began. And ultimately, they succeeded in exiling 10 of the 12 tribes. That Hoyu Aleha, I'm sorry, now, more than that, don't think. Now, we also know, and again, this is something that we learned a lot on the Bavli, that people say the lost 10 tribes. They're not as lost as people think, because even during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, Yoshio HaMelech brought back the 10 tribes. Did he bring all of them back? No, he did not. So there's no doubt that you have Yidden that live, who knows where, right in Sambatia, that they are members of the 10 tribes, 100%. But even during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, from each of the 10 tribes, many Jews returned. But there was one thing that never happened. And that is that even when they returned, prior to Sancheriv conquest, every Shevet had their part of the Holy Land in which they lived in. Once Sancheriv exiled us, even though we returned, we no longer lived each Shevet in their part. We lived all mixed the way we're living today. Today, most people don't even know what tribe they belong to. And they live wherever they want to live. So that's what's lacking. That even if Hoyo Allah, even if all the Jews, by the way, doesn't mean every single Jew. Can mean, but when one Yid goes, one Jew lives Israel, there's no more Yovel. It means the majority. It either the majority of the tribes, or it means the majority of every tribe. That's the most. The majority of every tribe, but that's not enough, because you need to have that they have to live on their part. That aval hoyu me'urbavim. But if they are living on the land, but they are intermingled, and look at the examples that he's giving. See, it's amazing. He's giving an example, not even about the 10 tribes, even about the remaining 2. The remaining 2 tribes is Yehuda and Binyamin. We are called Jews because we come from Judah. Binyamin was a very small tribe in numbers because of the disaster of Pelegish Begiva, and then there was a civil war. Then there was only 300 male members of the whole tribe of Binyamin. So Binyamin is very small. But nevertheless, there is the chelik of Binyamin, there's a chelik of Yehuda. Even if these 2 tribes, even if it's only Yehuda and Binyamin, that if each one lives on the other person's territory, that Sheshevet Yehuda be Binyamin, V'shevet Binyamin be Yehuda, so then even that already does not allow Yovel to return. Yovel is still suspended. So Talmud loimer yoshve'ah, l'chol yoshve'ah, and that's the l'chol yoshve'ah. And if you want to take a look in the Pnei Moshe, he tells you which one is learned from Yoshve'ah and which one is learned from the L'chol Yoshve'ah. We are around 12 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Vika Omar de l'chol yoshvei ksiv umashma bisman she yoshvei olel v'lo bisman she golem etoicha. So yoshvei means when they live there. L'chol yoshvei de
It was 600
l'chol
men.
means they should not be me'ubavim. I'm sorry, Danny.
Before it was 600, not 300. From Benjamin.
There was 600. I take it back. Okay, thank you. That means the Torah could have said the word yoshvei. The Torah says the words l'chol yoshvei. The last narrow line is darshinon mi yoshvei prat l'mirbavim. Mi yoshvei means that the l'chol is megale, that the yoshvei means they have to live on their part. And if they are intermingled, which means ve'ein kol shevet v'shevet dikan b'fnei atzmai, that every tribe is not distinct by living in their own territory, that's not the way God wanted. That's not the way we were supposed to be settled. The melachol darshinon bisman shekol yoshvei level emiksasan. So all means you have to have the majority. Even though he writes everyone means the majority. There's only a machlekes, again, the majority of numbers or the majority of each tribe. Doesn't matter. That was the majority of them. Nim say so oimer mishagolu shevet Reuven v'gad v'chatzi shevet Menashe. Then let's read back inside the Gemara. So them say so oimer akiv and shagolu shevet Reuven and God and chatzi shevet Menashe. From then batlu hayoivlois, and now you have Rebbe's hekesh of Zed Dvar Hashmita, Shomait, Shmita, not Shmita of not working the land on the seventh year. No, Yovel, the din that lands revert back to their original owners. When that is not in effect, so then you don't have the Midoy Raisa, you don't have the din of Shmitas Ksafim.
When you're saying Shmitas Ksafim, we don't have Shmita at all, no? Like the entire Shmita. Midoy Raisa, based on this.
No. Okay.
Isn't that an opinion that we learned?
That's really... the next step that our Gemara here doesn't even have to go. In other words, Danny's telling us that in the Bavli over there in Gittin, the Flamed Vav, in that area, the Gemara says that whenever Yovel is not Noyig, Shemitah is not Yovel. Because the Torah, we don't even need it for our limud. Because the whole thing is premised on the Hekesh, Zed Var Shmita Shomait, Shmita. And Rabbeinu HaKadosh makes the Hekesh between Shmitas Ksafim and Shmitas Karkois Yovel. That's enough for him. If there's no Yovel, there's no Shmitas Ksafim. We don't need to go. We don't have to link the din of resting the land. Even though what Danny is saying is also what the Rambam writes. The Rambam paskins that Shmita is only a Noyeg, Midoy Raisa, when Yovel is Noyeg. Fine, but we don't need that for our Gemara at all.
End of the day,
fascinating. In other words, what we learned
if Shemitah
today
is the Raisa, then you can't do a principle. That's basically what we're agreeing.
Clearly,
with.
By the way, the Bavli says the same thing. Everyone says the same thing. In other words, when Mashiach is about to come, let's go with what we're learning right now. Imagine when we're going to discover one of the first things that Rambam writes, when Mashiach will come, we're going to reenact the Sanhedrin. What will the Sanhedrin do? There are two things that they need to do in the beginning, very important. They have to determine the proper yichus of Kahanim and Leviim. They have to make them into muhzakim, and that's a big avodah. And they have to make sure that they say they are a kohen, even though they're meyuchas, they can get an aliyah, but how do you know that they're really a kohen? Maybe they're chalal, maybe they're not a kohen. The same thing goes with all due respect to you, to the Levi. That will be one big avodah to every single family to determine whether they are really or not. And then for the rest of us, they're going to determine what tribe we belong to. They're not going to dig deeper, right? Maybe there are mamzedim, mishpacha shenitma'a, nitma'a, but what tribe do I belong in? Why is that important? For all of you people that have merited to own real estate in Israel, it's going to be like Yehuda Ma'aseh. Don't think it's so simple. You might own land in someone else's tribe territory. And what will have to happen is that every Shevet will have to settle their land. I'm betting I'm from the tribe of Asher, whether my son Rabbi Mendel is happy or not, because I like over there the north by Miron.
I wonder who's getting Yamin Moshe.
Huh?
Who's getting Yamin Moshe?
I think Yerushalmi lenechel kol shvatim. So whoever has something in Yerushalmi, you're safe. That's the beauty, because anyone can live there, but you can't charge rent. You can only get the hides of the karbanos, which is more than rent. You don't charge rent, but you get more than the rent. Okay, let's go back over here. So now we're going back to the nusach that we write. And the Gemara says, two chedushim. First of all, the nusach in the Mishnah I just want to go back over here, is that Zajac shel prusbul, and this is a declaration that was recorded, that Moiser ani lochem ish ploini upleni hadayanim, and by the way, ish ploini upleni doesn't mean two, it means three. You, and you, that shebemakim pleni, you judges that are in a certain place, shekol chayv sheyesh li, that any debt that I have, she'egbenu, that I can collect it whenever I want. In other words, I'm giving the debts over to the Beis Din, and I'm appointing myself to be the instrument of the Beis Din to collect the debts. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Chizkiah b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, va'afilu nesunim beroimi. The Gemara means there are two ways of understanding the Gemara, and they both stand. Number one is, even if the lender and the borrower are not in the same city of the Beis Din, even if the judges are in Rome, you don't need to give over your documents to a Beis Din that's in front of you. That's number one. Number two, we don't make a document. Number two, another meaning is that even if the documents are in Rome, in other words, it's not only that Hillel made a leniency, you don't have to give over the documents, but it has to be potentially next to you. You don't even need that. Even if my documents are in Rome, it doesn't matter. That's the word. In other words, we don't need for the people to be in the same place. The lender can be in one place, the borrower in another place, the Beis Din in a third place. Yet it's so good. Says the Gemara, Rabba b'shem Rabban the Tamon. We are quoting the Chachamim in Babylonia that Shloisha Shadanu, if three judges adjudicate, umeis echad mehem, and one of them passes away, any din toida. And when you have a shtar that documents what happened in court, one might think that if one judge passed away, you're trapped. Why? Because normally the judges sign. But here only two judges are alive. So there's only going to be two signatures. What might someone think? That it was only adjudicated in front of a court of two. You can't adjudicate in front of a court of two. But that's not a problem. That yes, choismin b'shnayim. No, you don't even have to do that. Because when you document the ruling of the Beis Din, the ruling of the Beis Din is what is that which is important. When they gave a ruling, there were three. Now that you're documenting it, you have two people sign, and you should state in the document, you should make it clear that even though there's only two signatures, I want you to know, for people who read it, that dananu b'shleisha, when we were adjudicating, there were three judges. I'll prove that this is correct from our Mishnah, which is, in our Mishnah says, remember we were asking, like, what's going on over here? Now, Edom only have to be two. Why did the Mishnah write Dayanim or Edom? To hint to us that just like if the document is signed by Edom, two Edom are enough, there'll be only two signators, even if the judges are the ones signing the document, even if they sign it like witnesses, even if there's only two judges signing. Now, why would there only be two judges signing? Because one judge passed away or one judge went away. It suffices. It's enough. Eloma, I just want you to know that you should write in the document for people not to suspect. You should write that afal pi shechasam no b'shnayim dananu b'shloish. Now, hold on. Asks the Gemara that Yurab Chaga, you're proving a general rule of how it works when it comes to any din Torah. You're proving it from the way a prusbul works. Could you compare one to the other? Midas hadin. Midas hadin means any monetary case. Any case that's adjudicated in a Beis Din. Could you learn it from a prusbul? No. The Gemara says it doesn't make sense. We should not be allowed to learn one from the other. Now, why not? So the Marafulda writes around 12 lines from the top, because Midas Hadin means monetary cases. Prusbul he views as a din isur, even though it's about money, but it's not about money, because no one is denying the fact that there was a loan. But God prohibits me collecting the money. Prusbul circumvents that prohibition. So Prusbul is about an isura. And there's a rule that isura mimamoina loy lamedim. That's the way the Marafulda understands the question. The Pnei Moshe says even more. Not because of its money and isur. No. The Pnei Moshe also around 12 lines from the top. He says, Prusbul, what makes Prusbul work? The oral declaration. And like I mentioned, we in Lubavitch, we don't even write a document. I know other people write documents. We don't make a document. We make a declaration actually in front of the Beis Din, in front of whom we made the Hataras Nadarim, Erev Rosh Hashanah. And we, like we said, like the Rosh, the Alter Rebbe's Machmer, we say the Prusbul at the end of the 6th year and at the end of the 7th year. But in other words, really, it's a declaration. So the Gemara, and that's Gavaldik. The declaration could be recorded. But since the Ikar of the Prusbul says that Pnei Moshe is only Mesiras Devarim Ba'alma, and that which you are recording is only a record of the important, which is the oral declaration. So therefore, it's less important to have all three judges signing. But he says when it comes to monetary cases, many times the way the Beis Din would give their ruling would not be orally. Their ruling would be the document. The document would be the ruling. In other words, when there's a din Torah, sometimes the Beis Din verbalizes the psak din. They say, you give money to you. That's okay. Then it's a verbal. But many times they don't give a psak din verbally. They write their ruling on a document. So that document is a lot more important because that is the ruling. Maybe in such a case, you have to have all three signing. So the Gemara says, I disagree with your question. We could learn general Midas Hadin. We could learn it from a Prusbul. Ashkach Tani, I find a Braisa. I already found from the times of the Tanoim that Midas Hadin, yes, is learned from a Prusbul. Where did we find that? So as we mentioned in the introduction, and as we will learn in the next Mishnah, but we'll learn that part of the Mishnah, God willing, tomorrow, which there's a rule that a Prusbul can only be written or said if the borrower has land. I'll explain that why later. People get nervous right away. Hold on, because many times we lend money to borrowers who don't own land. We'll get to that tomorrow. But the rule is a Prusbul can only be made if the borrower has land. Now, what happens? Let's read the Braisa. If there is a case, there is a lender and a borrower. Okay, let's go. Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is the lender. He lent money to Shimon. Shimon does not have karka. Shimon borrowed money from Reuven. Shimon also, at another time, he lent money to Levi. Levi has land. That's the case. So the Braisa says that Reuven can make a Prusbul with Shimon. Shimon doesn't have land. So like we mentioned, there's a din of Shibuda de Rab Nosson. There is a rule that if A lends money to B, it's very important. B lends money to C. Two different transactions. A, if he wants, can collect from C. We view A being a creditor to C. Based on that rule, when it comes back to the Prusbul, even though Ein loy karka, even though Shimon doesn't have land, but in the case that ulechayavim loy, others who owe money to Shimon, Levi, Shimon also lent money to Levi. If Levi has land, then Reuven can write a Prusbul to Shimon. Hey Chavida, what will be an example? This is the Braisa just speaking out the case. Reuven shechayv l'Shimon. Now I gave the bad. I gave my example is the wrong example. The idea is right. The case of the Braisa is that Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, so Reuven owes Shimon. Levi borrowed money from Reuven. Same thing. Okay, even though Reuven ain't like karka, nevertheless, since Levi yesh like karka, koisven l'Shimon al chasav shel Levi. So that's the Gavaldik rule. He's happy with the Levium over here. What do we see over here? We see over here that we are comparing Prusbul. We're learning a law of Prusbul from Shibuda de Rab Nosson. Shibuda de Rab Nosson is a pure monetary law. Prusbul is Isura. Prusbul is Mesiras Devarim Ba'alma. So the Gemara is going in both directions. From the Braisa, you only see that you can learn Prusbul from Midas Hadin. But the logic is that if you can learn a din in Prusbul from Midas Hadin, then similarly, that's the Gemara's argument, you can learn a Midas Hadin from Prusbul. It should go both ways. And therefore, yes, the fact that in our Mishnah, the Mishnah hints to the fact that even if you only have two Dayanim signing, it's going to be a valid document of the Prusbul, even though it's a given that you have to write Afal Pisha Chasamnu Bishnayim Dananu Bishloisha. That is not only a din for Prusbul, but it's a din for all dinim amanis. You don't need to have all of the three judges signing it. The fact is, I just want you to know that any Maisa based in today, you'll have all three judges signing. It's common. I think, if someone got divorced, B'chal, the get is not given to anyone. Beis Din keeps the get. They're going to write a document for the husband, for the ex-husband, for the ex-wife, and who will sign it? All three judges. Or if you ever saw a document recording a giyur, all three judges sign a document. A Maisa based in a sign. But the chiddush here is that if one is not available, one passed away, then you can sign with the ones that are remaining as long as you record that they were all three present during the Din Torah.
Rabbi, in the Bryce's case, does Levi have to be aware that he owes money to Shimon through this third transaction?
No awareness is needed. In other words, whenever there is a lien, if I have a lien on you and you have a lien on someone else, I already have the lien on someone else to some level. Enough for you to be able, let's go over here to write a prusma. We're going to come back to this tomorrow. Like, why do you have to own land? What's the logic behind that? We'll get to it. Okay, let's begin.
The bigger question, I think, is how do you collect from a third party? The guy in the middle, passed away. How do you collect from the third party?
You have to prove.
That's not even aware that.
It's not about awareness. It's about being able to prove that there is such a debt. As long as I can prove that. In other words, if I loaned money to the Uven and the Uven passed away, but Reuven has a lien on Shimon's property, I can collect it from Shimon because it already belongs to the Reuven, and the Reuven is lien to me. Okay.
The amount matter at all?
What was that?
The amount?
No, of course, I can only collect that which is owed. Of course it matters.
Well, I'm saying like, did the rule with the three people and the, if like this guy, has land and I can borrow from somebody else even though I don't have land? Is that, like, what if he only owes me, let's say, I don't know, like $5 and I owe this guy 1,000? Like if I'm
You're asking about a prusbul, you're asking about what? What's the question?
It's about the case of the three people and the first rule.
The case of the prusbul, when it comes to land, just one big rule, land has infinite value. So whether right now on the market value of your land, it's $5, or whether right now, like in LA, your little piece of land is worth $2 million, it's worth $1 billion. So once you own land, there's enough land to guarantee the loan.
So what about if the loan itself they hit that amount?
Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't matter. The loan can be for $2 or for $1 billion. The land is lien for the loan. Only the amount of the loan. The money owed is only the money of the loan, but the land is linked to it.
Guarantee.
Yes. Okay. Let's move on. We have a few minutes. We have 1 minute. I want to learn the first din of the Mishnah, and that's about pre-dating or post-dating documents. Let me tell you the problem with pre and post-dating. First of all, it's not honest. There's a problem with. There's some inaccuracy over here. Yeah, if the loan was made today, right today. But let's put that aside. There's a much bigger problem. Any documented loan automatically creates a lien to the property. But when is the lien created? From when the date was written. If I predate, right? If I'm lending you $1,000 today, but I'm predating the document, it's going to give me false rights to your property because as far as the document is concerned, the lien began earlier. And that's unacceptable. That invalidates the document. Even if he agreed. When it comes to post-dating a document, since I, the lender, I am forgoing my lien, so I have the right to forgo my lien. So if I'm lending you money today, but we are agreeing for the document to be written in a month from now, which means that during this month, if you sell your land to someone else, I can never collect from it because it's not liened. If I agree to that, it's okay. In other words, when it comes to a normal loan document, the predating invalidates the document. The post-dating does not invalidate the document. I want to say that. No, you know what's a post-dated? What everyone does today, when they write a check, they write a later date. It's okay. It doesn't invalidate it. Says the Mishnah by prusbul, it goes in the opposite direction. That post-dating invalidates it. Predating will be okay. And let's read it inside. Says the Mishnah, Prusbol hamugdam, a predated Prusbol is going to be valid. Wow. Now, why? Same thing. A Prusbol is valid only for the loans that were made prior to the Prusbol. Right? Think, if I wrote a date earlier, if I wrote on the Prusbol a date earlier, yeah, so what happens? What happens if I do that? The lender is only harming the lender. Whenever the lender, who's the one who's writing the document, does something that is detrimental to the lender, we accept it. If I post-date it, then I'm tricking you. You understand? Because the word is that the Prusbol only helps from that which is made prior to the Prusbol. So if I predated it, the lender is losing those loans. Okay, not why. If he did it, it's okay. But if he post-dated it, that will be invalid. Because it's not true, because a Prusbol is only effective for the loans that were made prior to the execution of the Prusbol. And says the Mishnah, and look at the irony, how this is the opposite of the normal rule. As we just explained, this punkt fakert. Hamugdalim, they are psulim, because they're giving the lender wrong power to have a lien. Only hamucharim kshedim. And here it's the opposite. Okay, now one more din before Rabbi Rada begins to run over here. Who makes the Prusbol? The Prusbol is made by the lender. And therefore, if one person borrows from 5 people, if you have one borrower but 5 lenders, how many Prusbols do you need? 5. Every lender needs. But if you have 5 people that borrow money from one lender, there's only one lender, then only one lender, only one Prusbol is needed. We'll stop over here and we're going to continue this Mishnah, God willing, tomorrow.